All right, why don't we get started? It's nice. Just think of the best. All right. Good.
Oh, we good?
Let's start. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Kristen Latham. I'm from the Office of Legislative Oversight. This morning, instead of opting into a traditional OLO PowerPoint presentation, I'm going to give you a brief 2 to 3 minute summary of the report because I think a lot of it is actually going to bleed into what Linda is going to talk about after us. So first, real quick, the council asked us for this report to give us an overview of how the Office of Common Ownership Communities works with, or how common ownership communities in the county work with county government and different services available. I want to say thank you to everyone who helped us out with this report. So just a quick bit of background. There are, according to the latest annual report, over 1,000 COCs registered within the county with 139,000 homes and over 400,000 residents. Most condominium associations are located in Silver Spring, while most HOAs are located in Germantown. For this project, I will look at services provided by DHCA, DEP, WSSC, and DPS. Obviously, DHCA is the one who mostly interacts with the common ownership communities. They are kind of responsible for kind of technical support and any other kind of support that the COCs need. And there's been a primary focus on education in the past couple years. They've really upped that up, or revved that up in the past 2 or 3 years. We also looked at DEP, WSSC, and DPS. Overall, we found that the county agencies do not treat homes in common ownership communities differently than homes that are not in common ownership communities. It's different based on the location of the home and the type of home. So more specifically for DEP, there's 3 primary ways in which they interact. Solid waste services, which is based on location. The water quality protection charge, which is based on the type of building it is. And then the stormwater management facility maintenance, which actually is something that's really only available to common ownership communities. The county will take over maintenance of that facility. For WSSC, again, they don't distinguish between common ownership community and not. They distinguish between individually metered and master metered, and that's how they look at it, so they don't even know if it's in a common ownership community. And then DPS, and there are some folks from DPS here, they look at a home based on what type of building it is defined in the International Building Code, whether it's residential or commercial. And condominium buildings are deemed by the International Building Code as commercial. So their permit fees are based on the number of inspections or number of services or inspections required, and commercial buildings typically require more inspections. That's why the fees are higher. OLL also looked at utility companies. We looked at BGE, Washington Gas, and Pepco. And similar to WSSC, they look at it as master metered versus not master metered, and individually metered, and that's how they have all their rebates and their fees, how they distinguish them. So just real quickly, briefly, some of the common concerns we heard across the board about homes and common ownership communities. Again, a lot of these will overlap with what Linda talks about, and a lot of these are based around the financial stability and sustainability of common ownership communities, which I will say OLO did not get into in very much detail because the executive is doing a lot already on this. There's a task force on distressed common ownership communities that DHCA is helping to support. There's a study from the National Center of Smart Growth at the University of Maryland the executive is doing, and counties has also developed a community distress index. So we didn't really get into the financial piece of it because the executive was doing so much. But talking to people across the different groups of like realtors and common ownership community people, financial issues did come up a lot. They think in general that there needs to be more education for property managers and residents on the financial aspects of owning a home in one of these communities. And I think everyone agrees on that, and I think the DHCA is already working on improving that. Some suggested requiring common ownership communities to complete some sort of financial audit or reserve study to ensure that there's sustainability over time. Some brought up that they would be interested in some kind of low-interest loan program from the county for communities in distress to meet any maintenance or infrastructure needs that they don't have the funding for. And then also one of the bigger issues that came up a lot is this distinction between commercial and residential properties. Stakeholders feel that the rates and the rebates available for homes in COCs are not equitable to those not in COCs. So DPS is here and they can talk to you more about that distinction. So as far as recommendations go for OLO, we think that you should all discuss with DHCA methods to increase education. Again, like I said, they're already doing it, but it is hard to get to homeowners to give them the education they need to know what it really means to live in a condominium building or in an HOA. So they're looking at ways to do that. Request that you get updates on the task force for distressed communities and discuss any recommendations they suggest. It's my understanding that they are still in the process of finalizing that report. So, but once that gets done, I think that that's a discussion you should have. And then finally, talk to DHCA about examining the feasibility of looking at more precise geographic location. Right now, the HOAs or the common ownership communities, the data available on them is just by zip code. So you don't know where in Germantown it necessarily is other than zip code. So, and I think DHCA is working on trying to get more precise data so we can more accurately pinpoint where these COCs are in the county. So that's really it for me. Again, and a lot of it's going to, I think, overlap with what Linda has to say. So.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Linda, did you want to go next? Or?
I'll tell you what, I'll give you a little bit of background of what's in the packet on the other piece, and then I'll turn it over to the chair and to DHCA. You had wanted to have a discussion during budget. We postponed it a couple times, so I'm really glad that we found time for you to have a discussion about the CCOC. I want to say there's two things. So there's the Common Ownership Program, Common Ownership Community Program in DHCA, and then within that is the Commission on Common Ownership Communities. Obviously, they are quite integrated, but there are some differences of things that DHCA works on that are different from what the Commission specifically does. The Commission is really a volunteer organization. It's a volunteer commission that does a tremendous amount of work, which is why I'd really like you to hear from the chair.
Yeah.
And I think that you all are aware that a couple years ago, before we made the transition, there was a lot of concern about the capacity of the CCOC to manage cases, keep up with paperwork, do investigations, have timely hearings. I think you're going to hear about a tremendous amount of improvement that's occurred in that effort. And also in the packet that I provided for you, I did give you a little summary of the annual report. The annual report is in there. But I also included, in addition to some links to the websites, a couple of examples of things that they have on the website, particularly like frequently asked questions, both for people, what is a common ownership community? What happens when I move into a common ownership community? Can my common ownership community just raise my fee? Can they do these things? These are really important for people who are moving into what is a growing number of common ownership communities. Most of our new development is either in an HOA or a condominium association. We have some that isn't, but frankly, most of the new development is. And so I think what you hear from some of the concerns that got raised in the OLO report is people wanting to go in knowing with their eyes opened, what am I responsible for? How does this work? Once you've bought in, you're a member. It's important that elections are held fairly, meetings are posted. There's a lot of really good information on the DHCA website and in the manual that I think Mr. Fine's going to talk to you about for just things like how to hold the appropriate meetings, how to give appropriate notice, who has to be at meetings. So all these things are really, really critical. And then I would just say in your packet, I gave you a little bit of the budget information so that you can recall what the budget looks like for the COC program. The council did a couple of years ago make the change so that all the revenues from fees charged to COCs stay in that fund to be used for COC program and CCOC purposes. It can no longer have any excess revert back into the general fund. And then there is also, we can have a discussion about the distressed communities as well. But I think I'd like you to hear from DHCA and the chair about some of the progress that's been made and the activities in the report.
Thank you. Well, thank you for the history. I was going to say something much the same, that over the last few years, thanks really to the community, the common ownership community leadership coming to us and saying we need to make some improvements here. That we have really, I don't know if I would say it's night and day, but we've made a lot of progress in the systems and the operations and the functionality. So, you know, it is, for my colleagues who are new to the committee, you know, this is a issue that over the last 2-3 years we've been putting a lot of effort to try to improve. I know we have a ways to go, but we are, it's been a ongoing focus and it needs to remain one. This is a ongoing responsibility of the council and the county to relate to and support and ensure the success of our common ownership community. So I suppose I'll start with Director Getzinger and then we'll go to Mark Fine, who will share what he wants to say.
He's done with that.
I'm done with being the
director. Sorry.
Thank you, though.
Former acting director. Too.
Former acting director.
Titles forever.
Yeah.
Hello, good morning. Tim Getzinger, Chief of Finance and Administration for the Department of Housing and Community Affairs. Also a Baltimore native. Go Ravens, 8-2. Excellent start and
All right.
Great topic.
Baseball committee, I want to say.
Hey,
All right.
The Orioles, I don't have a lot to talk about with them, you know. But thank you. Thank you to Natalia, to Kristen, and to and to Linda. We've made a lot of progress with the COC program and working with the commission, and also we've done a lot with the Distressed Communities Task Force. I'm not sure necessarily where you want me to start, but I mean, we did take over the program, I believe, in FY17. It was originally in the common, the OCP, Consumer Protection.
Right.
And so when we originally took it, it only had one FTE. There was an investigator. Since then, the staffing has grown to now we have 2 investigators and an OSC, an administrative position. And then currently we're also working in updating some of our records and doing some other IT management. So we also have 2 temps that are working on the program. So we're well staffed and we are looking at educational initiatives and efforts. We're looking at the mediation aspects and the adjudicatory mission of the program, and we look to make it so that operations are working smoothly, but then also making sure that we are out in the community making a difference with distressed communities and any communities that have issues. One of the things that the program does is that it offers no-cost mediation and no-cost arbitration of issues between homeowners and their associations. If the program wasn't there, they'd have to go to court. So we save a lot of time and a lot of money through the program.
Okay.
And so my focus on the program is just the operations and the administrations, making sure that it's working smoothly. I have sat on the task force as well, so I have my hands in both. But then from the other side, Mark Fine, obviously the chair of the commission, and he does a lot of the education initiatives. He manages the commission itself. He's out there in the community, and he works in the mediation and the adjudicatory side. So with that, I don't know if Mark, if you have anything that you'd like to.
Mark, we'd love to hear from you. Okay. Thank you for what you're doing. Really appreciate your work.
Thank you for inviting me. Let's see,
Do you, I might need to lean in. Okay. Thanks.
For the 2 panel members' benefit that haven't been with it or I haven't talked to before, the CCOC was founded in 1991. We are the oldest and the largest regulatory body in the United States.
Oh.
Yeah. We are one of 3 bodies in the state of Maryland. Prince George's County.
The oldest and largest CCOC regulatory body.
Correct.
Okay.
Prince George's County, Charles County, and Montgomery County are the only 3 that exist in the state of Maryland. If you have a problem in the state of Maryland, you're in one of those jurisdictions, you have a choice of either going to court and spending about $10,000 to $12,000, or go to the Office of the Attorney General if it involves a Maryland regulation that they have not complied with. And you'll probably be there for 9 months to a year before they even get to mediation.
Can I just reflect on that for a moment? It's really important. We have in this county two that are, I can think of offhand, really relevant here, the CCOC and landlord-tenant.
Correct.
Where our goal is for people not to have to go to court, to find a solution that is where they may not even need a lawyer. They're able to represent themselves, but they're able to have a low-cost solution. And we will often have proposals before us that are seeking to push the system towards legal solutions when we have a functioning system that is designed not, so the people don't have to go to that level of effort and expense. So it's
Right.
just something
We work
important.
with Ms. McCray Moody all the time. She's
Yeah.
50 feet down the hall.
Yep.
So we're
Right.
doing what we need to do. As far as, I'm drifting a little bit into section 2 here. What have we done? The last fiscal year, we went from 3 panel chairs to 8. We've added 3 new mediators. All of them are voluntary. We're now up to 13 commissioners from 9. We still need 2 more, and then we're going to have 2 that drop in January. So
So the panel chair is the person who hears the case, right?
correct. If it goes to a hearing, the panel chair is a volunteer that doesn't have any affiliation within the commission, and then they'll be assigned a resident commissioner and a professional commissioner. There are 8 residential commissioners. They have to live in a common ownership community, be on the board of a common ownership community or something of that nature. Then you have the professional side, which has 7 members, either an attorney, a property manager, a real estate person, building, something to do with buildings, either from architecture to planning or what have you. So we will put one of each on either side for every hearing, and they will adjudicate the case. They will issue a final decision and order, and that decision and order is binding. In order to get it overturned, it has to go to the circuit court. We've adjudicated well over 100,000 cases since '91, and we have been overturned, I believe, a dozen times at the most. So it goes through a lot of hands to make sure that we're issuing what we need to issue correctly.
We should be getting yearly operating budget subsidies from the court system for keeping all these matters out of their system, but we don't.
I know. Some of the other things we've been working on, we have finished updating the decision and order manual. That is the one that shows a decision and order that has been rendered, and it's in there, so you can catalog it by, I want to know about architecture, I want to know about a board meeting, or what have you. The cases are put in there generally on a weekly basis, and that's going to be online here shortly. We finished beta testing our decision and order search engine. We're now in the process of putting it online, so that will go into a secure website within the county so that they can only get to certain parts of it to see the decision and order, to make sure that we don't have any problems with somebody going in and tampering. We have updated the community resource manual and the director training guide, which I have, I believe, right over here. Oh, okay. The one with the blue is the director training manual. That's what they get every time someone takes the class. And the white one is a kind of day-to-day, how can the board run the organization, what they need to do.
Okay, I need to pause you on this one. So I am told that the website is presently down. Is that right for the training?
The director training is currently offline because of some issues with people doing things they shouldn't be doing, constituents. It is currently slated, we have a hard date of 12/31. The system itself is ready, we just have to integrate it so that we can get the information we need about the person, so it generates the certificate, what association they're with, what the position is in the association, that kind of thing. So it's some
Is that
tweaking.
a concern that has been raised to me is that for a CCOC trying to recruit board members, that they are told that they have to take a training, but then the website where they would see that is not currently up. Is that accurate? Can you help me out there?
The program is not up.
Yeah.
The online training, the
Right.
CCOC database and website is
Right.
up and
CCO
running.
Database is up, but the program, so what's the
Program.
status on that?
We'll have that on, okay.
I'm going to direct that to Tim because I think this is DHCA.
So the issue with the online training is that we have different monitoring techniques, and what we were seeing is that people would go in and then they had the ability to fast forward and then take the test without actually going through the training. And so we were taking a look at those statistics.
What the county employees might do with their particular training.
But you can't do that. See, you can't fast forward with those,
is
which
that
is
right?
exactly what we're doing with this.
Touche.
Exactly. And so there's 5 main sections, and so we're going to break it up from one long training into the 5 different sections, and then have a test at the end of each section, which is very similar to what employees have to do with the security training. So that way,
Why wouldn't you leave it up until you have the new system ready to go? I mean, it's a problem for a CCOC trying to recruit a member that, they try to point people to what their responsibilities will be in order to get certified, and they can't.
As far as not being able to get into it, they can take the class. We offer a class at 1401 every month. We have gone out on site at least twice a week. Since July 1st, we have trained 327 people
In person.
in person. There were several problems that existed with the old system. As Tim was saying, you can fast forward through it. You could go back and change your answers on the exam. You couldn't get to the links because it was set up to link into YouTube. The new one, they're embedded into it. So everything is running.
The new one will be up 12/31? That's
Yes.
the switch on?
But we have told everyone, if you can't get to one of our in-persons at DHCA headquarters, let us know. We'll come to you, and we have been doing that.
Okay.
Commissioners have been at least twice a week training somewhere.
Well, let's please not miss 12/31.
No, it won't.
Sorry, I interrupted you there. Please continue.
No problem. Last year, we trained 395 people online and 582 in person in fiscal 19. We have, in addition to the director training, we've added classes on understanding your governing documents, understanding and reading your financial statements, preparing your budget, ensuring your reserves are adequate, how to run and participate in the board of directors meeting, and how to successfully hold an association election. We have a date to bring those online sometime in the first quarter of the year. They're already existing in person. We just have to flip it, put it into the online, and it's there. So there'll be less issues. We have placed every legacy case that we can find and know of in storage into the case management system. We were paper up until 17, and we've taken all of those cases, now scanned them in, and they're actually in the case management system. So if somebody does an inquiry, we're going to see things that happened several years ago, and we know everything about that case, so if we need to reference back to it. And as I said, the decisions and orders is done. We're just waiting to get it into the secure system. Then you can search any type of information on those decisions and orders. We update that every week. We're in the process of archiving all the association's governing documents because most of them can't locate them, and it's a hassle for them. The court systems database is going to be going down shortly, and you're not going to have access, so we're doing that. And we are doing proactive visits to all the associations that want us to do training.
Sorry, please continue. Apologize.
Plans are, we want to continue updating the case management system so it's fully automated to do everything we want it to do, from generating a letter to the complainant respondent to emailing a panel if there's something that's put into the system, to tracking. If somebody doesn't do something by a certain date, it'll send an email to the staff saying, check this case. Once we have the director training online, we're going into that. That shouldn't be that big of a fix. It's just a matter of putting this stuff in place. As I said, the online director training program will be online by 12/31. All the other modules will be in the first quarter. We are also combining the online documentation database and the in-person database into one, so that if somebody searches to say, has this person taken it, they'll see a complete list of everybody, because right now the two don't mix, they don't integrate. We're in the process of developing a sample governing document template. So if an HOA, condo, or co-op wants to know, how do I do this, what should be here, we'll have samples of everything from declaration to bylaws to rules and regs to an architectural, whatever they need. And that's in the process being developed now. We're going to do whatever we can do to help the Distressed Community Task Force. We've been there, we're here to do what we need to do. We recognize that there is an issue, and it's a big issue. We want to roll out the rest of the training modules to associations that we've got in the pipeline to work on. We're in the process of updating 10B, a couple of tweaks we need to do. We'll talk about that at a later date, but we're in the final stages of getting it ready to bring it up. As I said, we are continually being proactive and going out to associations to talk with them, train them, whatever we need to do. And I mentioned a minute ago that since the beginning of the fiscal year, we've trained 327 people in the director training class. We continue to be the model for other jurisdictions. New Jersey has asked for our assistance. We were just in West Virginia, rolling it out to their governing body. Arizona is looking, and we were having some conversations with Virginia to model our stuff for them. We are in communication with the city of Gaithersburg, and we're going to be scheduling 3 different meet and greets for all the associations, and they'll come on board with the CCOC. Once that is done, we're going to be talking with Poolsville.
So our CCOC database doesn't count those that might be in Gaithersburg or other municipalities?
That's correct.
Wow.
And
So they don't participate in the CCOC program? The city does its own?
Anybody can participate.
Okay.
We don't care where you're from. The more knowledge you have, the better off you are.
But you're not, okay.
We can in the in-person, we know who is what. Were they a board member? Were they a resident? Were they somebody from out of state? With the 327 is strictly board. It was something like 650 odd that took the class from July 1. 327 is strictly board members.
Okay.
That's not including residents or whatever. Other than that, we haven't been busy.
No, remind me your salary for all this? Thank you, Mark. Really appreciate it. Can we just go through the OLO questions real quick, and then I'll turn to my colleagues for their questions. First one from the OLO report was about additional educational efforts for those who may be purchasing into a CCOC. Get your thoughts on that. We'll start with Mr. Getzinger.
Well, just for some background, DHCA does have some different homeownership classes that it offers. It offers a program for MPDU orientation, and you know what to expect if you're buying into it, and it's a program that you need to take if you are looking to buy into an MPDU. We also have first-time home buyer classes that we offer. We also have an MOU with the state that offers different types of homeownership and financial literacy classes to folks that are looking into homeownership or who have experienced issues in homeownership. In the past, say FY08 to 11, that MOU concentrated on foreclosure issues. Now it is more financial literacy and prevention type activities.
I think you ought to be talking to GCAR. Do you have a program with GCAR around the realtors so that when they are involved in a transaction that, you know, might be a home in a common ownership community, they can provide some, like a pamphlet or something, you know, a link to the site for the prospective buyer?
I don't know that we don't do anything like that right now, but I think that's
Yeah.
a great idea.
Yeah. Thank you. Just came up with that. I don't know how I do it.
And then, of course, we offer the board training for all of the board of the directors for common ownership communities. In terms of offering different education to homeowners in general of associations and condos, I want to remind everybody that we only have that the COC staff is 3 FTEs, and we have 15 volunteer commissioners who have a very heavy caseload.
Right.
So whereas I think that there is certainly some, a lot of positives that are gained here, I think we would need to be creative in how we provide that. Maybe it's something that's online.
Yeah, I think
I'm just,
gotta use the
I'm
word
not sure
there.
what it would
Yeah,
look like.
efficiency is
Yeah,
for all the
exactly.
hundreds of thousands of, or 150,000 units.
Yeah,
That's a challenge.
Yeah, there are nearly 1,100 associations, 140,000 units, 400,000 residents of the county. So we would need to find some way of really doing it in an efficient manner.
But, yeah, that's what the internet is for.
That's exactly right.
But for the new home buyers, maybe something that, you know, you can, can be provided to those who might buy. Mark, any comment on that particular topic area?
Sorry.
Good.
Okay, what, the plan was to have the new owners get involved in the understanding your governing document module. Probably a quarter of the phone calls we get are from somebody that just bought a house. Doesn't matter, MPD, whatever. Keys are dangling, sign here. And that's exactly what they do. Then they realize they just signed a document that said that the board of directors can raise their assessment at any amount, anytime they want.
Yeah.
So it's more of an education to
They don't know
look
that-
at the sections
Right.
of your documents before you buy, so that there isn't a problem or a sticker shock when you find out, you know, short time afterwards that your budget isn't going to make it. And I don't care if you're low, middle, or high income, somebody raises an assessment from 10 to 30%, which has been done, it's a problem.
I mean, there could be some transparency there, like, you know, the last 10 years of fees are disclosed in, you know, in the transactions or something, just so people understand what they're.
Right. A lot of the boards don't even know what documents they need to have in the resale packet. So we've been expressing that to them a lot. And it's also in the director training module when we revisited and revise things, so that they know exactly what the board must turn over, as well as the
People need to understand if they're buying into a community that may be likely to have a 20, 30% fee increase over the next 3-4 years because of some reason, some major project that's happening. Like, they need to understand that.
Absolutely.
All right. So as far as updates from the Distressed Communities Task Force, we will need those. What's the timeline for that?
Absolutely. We did expect to have the report by now. There have been some timing issues with it, but hopefully we'll have it within the next, I'd say, 2 months. And just an overview of what that study is. We had an initial 2 studies that were done last year, and it was a quantitative study taking a look at the different data sets that are available. Unfortunately, there isn't a lot of data on condos, on associations. Actually, we collect most of the data. And then on the qualitative side, it was looking at different best practices in running different associations and what other jurisdictions are doing to kind of prevent some of the distress. So those were the 2 studies that we already have. We'll be glad to provide those to you if you haven't already had them. We can certainly get those to you. And then this next study adds to it, and it takes a look at answering 4 key questions. The extent of condos in financial crisis in Montgomery County, how many communities are in distress and what's the extent. And I want to kind of extrapolate. COCs, they include homeownership associations, condos, and co-ops. There's only a handful of co-ops. Associations are generally operating well. What we're finding is that as a percentage of those communities that are in some sort of crisis, it's mostly condos, so that's what the study focuses on. It doesn't focus on the other. Second, the characteristics that these distressed communities have in common. Are they geographically clustered, which I think gets to the third recommendation in the OLO report?
Yeah.
Are they dispersed across the county? Does community size relate to risk of distress? Is distress more apparent in communities with certain socioeconomic characteristics? Three, the study will look at the negative effects of distress. How does this impact condo owners, their surrounding neighborhoods, and the county in general? And the fourth major area that it will be studying is what policies can most effectively address the distress that the communities are experiencing, and what further research is needed. And it will take a look at different financial indicators. It will take a look at some of the legislative history, both in Montgomery County and in surrounding jurisdictions and in the state and in other states, to see what are other communities doing. This research hasn't been done before, and I think it'll provide a lot of the information that we can really build on when we think about what are the next steps. Is there funding needed? Is there more training and education needed? And so one of the next things that we're doing is through this Distressed Communities Index, and we worked with the task force and county stat and department staff, and we took a look at different data that was out there and a number of different indicators. And we chose, I believe, maybe 15 or 20 communities that we will be inviting, and we will be going out there with members of the task force to the communities, along with the University of Maryland, and we developed a stress test, basically a questionnaire, and then we'll be taking a look at some of the financials and the reserve studies to kind of see what is it, what are the major sources of the distress. One of the reasons why that is important is because what we want to do when we do come to the council with some revisions to 10B, we want to propose a mandatory survey instrument. Currently, we do have a survey, but it's not mandatory, and we only receive results from maybe 25% of the communities. And so I think that the stress test that we will be going out will help really ask the right questions, because we don't want to go out there asking 100 questions and say that's a mandatory survey. That's probably not fair, and it's probably not going to give us the results that we need. So we want to be able to make sure that we're asking the right questions in a very concise manner, and in a way that we can aggregate and really be able to take a look at, what are the true indicators, and how do communities rank, and then where do we need to really focus our attention and effort in getting to the the issues here.
Okay.
That's where we are with that.
All right, and the data, you're working on a way to have better geographic data?
Yeah, so online we have on demand a listing of all the different communities, and you're right, it only has the zip code. I reached out to the planning department to kind of see what is out there.
Yeah.
And there are two parcel files, the point file in which every tax record has a point. In this case, each residential condo owner would have a point, and then planning department could query out the residential ones, like the condos. Yeah. Really, the difficulty is that these aren't rental communities in which you generally have like one tax ID. For like a 100-unit rental project, you have 100 tax IDs for a 100-unit condo. Yeah. So really aggregating that, I think was the question. And from what I hear, the planning department has been able to do that, and so we'll take a look at the different data sets that they have, and we can kind of take a look at what the next steps are in kind of putting that data out there in a useful way.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. All right, Mr. Friedson.
Thank you for this. I think it's a helpful conversation that we're having. Glad that we were able to schedule it. Thank you, Mr. Fine, for all of your hard work and efforts. I think this is a really important area for us to look at, as this is a growing segment of our community that are in common ownership communities. And I also think that particularly the condo, as Mr. Gutzinger, you noticed, it's a challenge. I think, one, it affects renters as well, because a lot of those older condos are rented out, and the costs associated with the condo buildings then eventually get passed on to the renters. It's also an access point for naturally occurring home ownership, affordable home ownership of folks who are able to access the community and be able to buy a home. It's, as we talk about our affordable housing conversation, I think talking about common ownership communities, particularly condo communities, are really important. I think that the report is going to be really helpful in terms of the financial distress. I think that getting the information and the training out is great. I think making sure that we have as much data from these communities as possible will be helpful. But I think ultimately, at least from everybody I have spoken to who have been dealing with these issues, it's a cost challenge. It's a financial challenge, and some of those costs are incurred by the county on the communities. And so I'm just wondering, what focus will the report have on changes related to what the county does and how much it costs communities from the county's perspective? Obviously, some of it is your regular maintenance and other issues, and older buildings, fixing an elevator or doing facade improvements or a roof. I mean, these are really expensive endeavors that can have significant costs, particularly for older buildings. But some of them are related to the Water Quality Protection Fund, as was listed in the report. The fact that we classify these as commercial buildings, even though they're residential in their nature. I understand, that is an international standard, but what aspect of the report, I mean, I understand the report's not done, but what aspect of the report will focus specifically on how much the county is imposing upon these and what flexibility the county might have in alleviating some of that imposition?
I wouldn't expect that this report will touch on any of that. The OLO report did just that. What the task force's report with University of Maryland will do is just take a look at, if we're talking about financial issues and indicators, it'll take a look at budgeting issues, reserve study issues, the cost of generally doing business. I understand what you're getting at, but I think that the OLO report touches on a lot of those water quality issues, permitting fee issues, being treated as a commercial enterprise, those kinds of issues. I think the report that the task force and that University of Maryland will be coming out with will be those issues that DHCA can most directly impact and take actionable steps. DHCA doesn't have anything to do with the permitting aspects of condos and how they're treated as business enterprises.
Got it. Okay, so I would just propose that we have a specific session here to talk specifically about the costs associated with common ownership communities, particularly condos, and what, if any, flexibility the county has in mitigating some of those issues. I don't know what our flexibility is on the commercial classification. I think that's a big part of the problem. That could be a DPS question. I see we have DPS here, the Water Quality Protection Fund. I don't know what flexibility we have. I don't know that we necessarily have to flesh out conclusions today, but I think having this conversation and not focusing primarily on the costs that the county is imposing on these communities that represent a growing segment, that are an important part of our affordable housing and access to home ownership that we have in the county, I think would be a missed opportunity. So I hope that we can take that aspect of it and really focus and hone in on it and figure out what tangible things we can do as a county to mitigate some of those cost concerns, because, it's one thing to figure out who's in financial distress. I think it's just as important, if not more important, to figure out why they're in financial distress and how we actually can help. So I'd hope that we can move that forward.
I would just say DHCA in a specific instance or two has worked with communities to see if, for example, if CDBG funds can be used to assist some of the owners, and done a mix of trying to help. Particularly, there was an issue with one with balconies or some with some flooding, and when there's a mix of incomes and it's appropriate to use federal funds, they've worked with the condominium associations to try to build some flexibility in there. It's only been a couple of examples so far, but I know that they've been approaching it where they can.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I think there's been a lot of work on an ad hoc basis, but I think what I'm talking about is a much more comprehensive look at what are all the tools in our toolkit, and what are the tools that we're using, intended for benefit, but perhaps creating harm, and how do we look at it in a holistic way? What programs can we make funding available for some of these projects? Maybe it is in a building where certain people can qualify for,
right. And I
for it, because not everybody is in the same financial situation. In a common ownership community, the entry points for different residents in that common ownership community could be extremely different, but the assessment is the same. If there's a need for an elevator to be replaced, or some type of other flooding or other issue, two people could move in 25 years apart. They're probably at a very different financial circumstance, and so figuring out what tools we have available, what flexibility there is that perhaps we haven't looked at, I think that's a discussion, perhaps not for today, but one that we absolutely need. I think it'll be the most important discussion we have related to common ownership communities personally, because it actually will demonstrate what we are doing and what we can do to actually provide some level of relief. It's one thing to identify some of the challenges we face, another thing to actually figure out how we solve the problem.
I think, as Linda had indicated, we do have a handful of different projects that we're kind of working on in a pilot basis. One community, we did a loan guarantee. That was almost 10 years ago, and basically the association needed some work done. They needed to get a bank loan. The bank would not provide it because they didn't have any assets to really levy it on, and so we put up maybe $1 million. They were able to get a $4.5 million loan, and then over time they were able to pay back, or actually we were able to take back the guarantee because they were paying off that $4.5 million bank loan. So there's that. There are different federal funding that's available for that, for balconies. We also worked on a drainage project. There's also $1.5 million available from the Pepco merger that the Green Bank currently has, and it's geared to condos to bring down the cost of energy, and it's 1.5 for both Pepco customers and also WGL. So we are closely working with the Green Bank to take a look at what kind of projects and programs should be run with that funding. So there are a few, but I understand exactly what you're saying.
Can we get a side-by-side, like, have you already prepared that of all the times when we're charging fees as commercial?
And I think the other issue is the master meter versus individual. Exactly. So in some cases, some of these energy programs are available if you have individual meters, but they're not available if you have a master meter, even though both situations may be a condominium. So
maybe like a follow-up memo from OLO about some of the consequences of the commercial classification. And
Right. Like, for example, WSSC just passed in Annapolis. They now have a program. They now have a program for master metered customers to have relief on their bill. They had been trying for years, and they finally got it passed. So people are doing things.
Okay, so we'll look at what those issues are, what flexibility we have, so on. Okay. Jondo.
Thank you, and agree with my colleagues. Looking forward to the February reports. And following Councilmember Friedson, that was going to be my main question. Was about the fees, and so I just want to amend that and say that when you talk to folks in COCs and condos in particular, that's the issue that I think I hear the most about is that we're treated differently, even though we're residential and we have all, this high cost of fees. And while we want to know where the distress is coming from, you talked about the major sources. I imagine that this is certainly one of them. And so, if not the number one. So I think we want to have that discussion with DPS. And then also look into what potential changes at state and or county level would need to happen, even if we often do things first in Montgomery County, even if we are charting a new path outside of other parts of the country or the region. I think I'd also want to know, what would that look like? What would the revenue implications be? Because I think this is hitting communities particularly hard. When you look at where most of our units are that have 10,000 or more, Silver Spring, Germantown, Rockville, and Gaithersburg, which happen to be 4 of the top 10 most diverse cities in the United States. And to the points that were made earlier, the fact that this is one of the easiest entry points into home ownership for people who are trying to get that equity, I think we really need to pay more attention into how we're either hindering that or not helping these communities. So great to hear about the WSSC program. That's something that comes up a lot, that master meter issue. And so just wanted to say that, look forward to the reports, and if we could add that to our analysis and the side-by-side, that would be great. Thank you.
All right. Any additional comments? No? Thank you again. Appreciate your work. We'll continue this in the new year as we will be returning to the Distressed Communities Report, and hopefully maybe at that time we'll have a little bit more information about the commercial fees issue. All right. Thank you very much. We'll move on to our next item.
Mark, good to see you in person. Mark, good to see you. Look forward to meeting.
Actually, Tim, one last question. Last week on the topic of ADUs, I was at a presentation, and the presentation from DHCA said that when an applicant in an HOA or a common ownership community wants to do an ADU, that they have to provide a letter from the HOA or the common ownership committee saying that they approve it, or I think that was the word in the presentation, approve it. That was not the way that we framed the legislation. It was that the applicant had to certify that they are allowed. And so I wanted to just ask if you could please follow up on that. We can circle back on it.
Absolutely.
Thank you. It's a really challenging issue because if someone self-certifies incorrectly, then they're suddenly liable for having spent a lot of money that they can't actually get any benefit from. So we don't want that. On the other hand, we don't want anyone to not have the right that that they are actually entitled to because of some bureaucratic reason from the entity.
Absolutely. The ADU bill, I guess, takes effect basically 1/1, if I'm not mistaken. And we're looking at what can we do to really do some marketing and some outreach to make sure that everybody understands the program and the new flexibilities that it provides, and taking a look at different potentially amnesty, things like that. We were hoping to do some additional navigation. I don't know that we have the staffing ability to necessarily do everything that we want to do, but we are looking to help folks through the program because I think that that's going to be
Challenging.
It is. Yeah.
Important. Yeah. So we'll return to that broadly, but I just wanted to put a pin on that particular discrete issue. Thank you again, Mark. Appreciate your work. Okay, next item.
The second item is a supplemental appropriation for $4 million to DHCA, and the source of funds is federal grant home funds. The original appropriation for FY20 was $1 million. We do an appropriation sort of based on an estimate. No matter what the appropriation is, if there isn't federal money to back it, they can't spend more than they have in federal money. They're asking for a $4 million appropriation, and this is based on repayments that came in FY19 and 20 that were not included in the estimate, the original estimate of $1 million. And these funds go back into affordable housing production and preservation, generally in coordination with private and nonprofit housing partners. So
That's
I
that
would,
line item in the HIF. It's called Affordable Housing Production and Preservation.
no,
Fund.
actually, this is home grants, so this is not, this is different. This is federal home grants. It's not specifically in the HIF, it's in a different part of the appropriation.
Oh,
But that you
Still
do. So
available.
what you see, so each year, the department comes to you with an estimate on what they expect to get from community development block grants, home grants, and ESG grants. And on some of those, there's estimates, because in the home grant in particular, you're allowed to have program income. So there's an estimate on new funds plus an estimate on program income. In this particular case, more program income has come back through home funding, and so additional appropriation is needed, but it's used for the same types of purposes.
okay.
And so I just did also want to note that just for scheduling purposes, we're having this work session before the public hearing. And so if there is some additional information raised at the public hearing, you can reconvene to reconsider. But this would allow this to move forward, hopefully in a more expedited fashion.
Okay,
I didn't know we were allowed to do that.
right. As appropriate. Okay, Andrew.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it's different than the HIF, and that's basically my question. How do we determine when opportunities arise, whether we access this funding, whether we access HIF funding? How does that interface work? And could you just share that for us and I suppose for Mr. Joando's favorite millions watching at home?
Sure. Asim Nigam, Director, DHCA. To answer your question, Mr. Fitson, in this case, we are receiving considerable amount of program income. And in terms of how this money will be lent out, we are doing a forum this coming Wednesday. And as part of the forum and part of the process that we're going to talk about and the funds that are available, these $4 million will be a part of that whole equation in terms of the availability of the funds. So in case someone has a preservation project or a new construction project someone wants to do, special needs housing, it has to be home eligible because these are federal funds. So we'll make those funds available out to the developer community as well along with the HIF funds.
But from a practical base, I'm just trying to understand from a practical standpoint, opportunity comes in to retain or create affordable housing. Does it come out of this fund? Does it come out of the HIF? How does that decision get made? Obviously, I'd love for it to come out of federal funding, so that's only partially county taxpayer money as opposed to all county taxpayer money, so that we can leverage the HIF money as far as possible. I'm just wondering how those decisions get made.
When a developer approaches us with their project, we look at what their project is, whom they're serving, what the availability of the funds is, and as I mentioned, these funds have to make sure that these projects are home eligible. So we make that determination.
So is that
in
done
our
first?
office.
So first we try to use this funding. If this isn't available, we go to HIF.
I'm not sure what was done in the past, but going forward, since these funds have a time limit within which we need to commit and also spend, so it will be our department's priority to commit and spend these monies on a first come, first served basis. So we look for projects where this money can be used sooner than later, so that we are not sitting on these funds, and then we are up against HUD regulations, whether or not we are spending these funds in a timely fashion.
Great. Well, I would echo the amen earlier and just say I hope that is continues to be the practice, that we make sure that this is prioritized and that we don't lose the opportunity to invest federal dollars in local affordable housing priorities, and that we make sure that this is the first priority of making sure that happens. The only other question I have, so the $4 million that's being referenced, is being requested. This is $4 million of authorization for what will all be federal money or repayments to the federal funded program. Is that accurate?
Yes, so it's appropriation, but it has to be.
It's authorization.
They cannot spend.
Money that
If
isn't-
they have appropriation, they cannot spend unless they have federal funds backing it. So if you gave them $4 million of appropriation, they only got $3.8 million back in repayments, they could only spend $3.8 million.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So I just want to, I was familiar with that, I just want to make that clear, because I'm not sure it was totally clear as we explained it, but this is an authorization to spend federal money that's going to be more than what we anticipated, which is a positive. It's not an additional outlay of county taxpayer money. Thanks.
And if you can get them to spend more than $4 million, we'd appreciate that.
Come on back.
All right.
Okay.
Well, this is a repayment of previously appropriated money. We're not getting new federal funding. Okay. Thank you very much. Let's move forward with this expeditiously. All right. On to our final item. We'll ask the rest of DHCA's team to come on up. All right. Christine, thank you for your work here. Great packet. Appreciate the way you laid out the issues nicely on page 2. It's a great summary. And we have one issue that we have not had a chance to resolve, so we'll go to that. But Christine, maybe you could just please review what we've achieved so far.
Certainly. This is the third committee work session on Council Bill 2419, Landlord-Tenant Relations, Obligations of Landlord Air Conditioning. The committee has worked through a number of substantive issues during the first 2 work sessions, which are summarized in your packet. And the outstanding issue that the chair referenced relates to whether a tenant should have an option through an addendum to the lease to opt out of the air conditioning requirement. This opt-out would apply to situations in which a tenant would have individual control over an air conditioning unit. So it wouldn't be centrally controlled by the landlord in a building that has central air conditioning. And it would be an individual air conditioning unit. So such as the standard example would be the window unit. And so in this potential amendment, the tenant could elect to have no air conditioning installed if those criteria were met, that if installed, it would be provided by one or more individual units, and there was an addendum to the lease specifying the additional amount of rent that would be required if air conditioning were provided, acknowledging that the tenant has been offered but elected to not have air conditioning. And it would also have to be explicit that the tenant has been informed of the tenant's right to file a complaint with the director of the Department of Housing and Community Affairs, as the tenant has the right to do under Section 29-36 of the code. So that was the remaining issue. The other issue is just that there were a number of decisions made by the committee at the last work session without specific language in front of you, and so you can see on Circle 1 is the text of the bill, of version 4 of the bill that incorporates all of your edits, but it's there for your review, obviously, to make sure that it accurately reflects your current thinking on the bill.
Okay. All right, so this final issue is yet another challenging aspect of this issue. We've heard from tenants who say that it's their preference not to pay for air conditioning. It's an affordability issue for them. I've actually been that tenant in my life as well. So we would want to be sure that, we're trying to find the right balance here. So let me ask for some comments from DHCA on this issue, please. Director Nagam.
The way we have presented our language now, based on the fact that if the tenant really wants to opt out in case they have the control of the AC unit within their own unit, I think the way the language is spelled out now gives them the flexibility and also protects their right in terms of the lease and what the actual, responsibility of the landlord is.
So how does this work where it says that it specifies an additional amount of rent that would be required if air conditioning were provided? So the tenant, it's June, and the tenant has decided in advance that they're not going to have air conditioning, and then they decide that that's really uncomfortable. Can they would know that if they want to have air conditioning, that their rent will go up by a certain amount of dollars, and that's stipulated in the lease? Is that, although I'm not sure that they can necessarily do it mid-lease, we should talk about that separately, but is that the basic idea, is that the tenant is empowered to know, at renewal, and that it's their choice completely, and so they can make a very transparent decision?
Yeah, that is our understanding, that when a tenant is signing the lease, they have this option, and then they say whether they want to opt out that option. Now, if it is mid-lease, and all of a sudden tenant decides, I want AC, then it may or may, they can still have it in terms of the AC, but then how soon they will have it, that part has to be figured out. Because, if it's in the middle of, let's say, August, and the tenant all of a sudden decides, hey, it's been very hot, I need AC. And then they give the notice to their landlord, I need AC, I'll pay more in rent. Then how soon the landlord will be able to make the AC available, that's something we'll have to figure out.
And that is a regulatory issue? You can figure that out?
Yeah, that's something we'll have to see if we can address it in our regulations. Because we'll have to give the landlord sufficient time to comply with that request.
Does the administration, does the executive branch support this amendment?
The way it is laid out, yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll have some discussion. Mr. Chawando.
So the county executive supports the opt-out provision for AC requirements.
Yes, we do want to empower the tenants in case they want to opt out.
Do you also support an opt-out? Would you support an opt-out for heating requirement?
No, heating, that's not part of this.
No, I understand it's not part of this bill, but would you, if there were a bill to provide an opt-out for heating, to amend our current law, would you support that with the county executive? Do you as DHCA director support that?
I'll have to think, I don't know what the administration's stand will be, if we can have the tenant opt out of heating, but if you look at any other jurisdictions across the country, heating is a must, which, as an example, the car should have heating. They may not have AC, but they should have heating. So I'm not sure if, and I cannot speak for the county executive at this point, but I don't think we'll have that opt-out as such.
Okay, yeah, I would hope not. I mean, I would think that the way this bill has been presented, the reason I co-sponsored it, is because it's a health and safety bill. It's to say that no matter who you are, how much money you make, where you live, that you shouldn't have to live in a unit, in a building, that is hotter than now we've set it at 80 degrees. And I think to allow the tenant to opt out is to say to someone who signs up who's low income that, hey, if you can get this lower rent, and when it's not hot, it's going to sound like a pretty good deal. But then the issue you were just describing, when it gets 100 degrees and you have no AC and you have a senior or a young child, I don't think we want to be in the position of saying that empowers a tenant. I don't think it does. And the staff noted that in Dallas, Texas, and Phoenix, Arizona, where AC is required, there is no option to opt out of the lease. Is that correct, Christine?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So I'm kind of perplexed by the administration's position. I'm going to be against this. I think we should have the requirement, or I'm going to be for the current bill and against the amendment. I don't think it makes sense under the context of health and safety.
All right. Well, I'm really listening to the advice of the Department of Housing and Community Affairs here. I think this is a difficult balancing act. I would note the Dallas and Phoenix, I think, had 85 degrees as their temperature. It was not, we're pushing way farther than those jurisdictions. And I do agree it's a life safety issue that we're trying to get at. I also have to say I have been that tenant who did not have air conditioning. So I don't know that I would have wanted to pay more, Who knows? I don't know. Can't go back in time, really. But this is where we're trying to balance affordability and housing quality, and I'm willing to support the county executive's recommendation and the department's recommendation.
I agree. I would support the county executive and DHCA's recommended amendment language.
All right. So that's 2-1, I think. Any other discussion items? Yeah.
Yeah, I just had two clarification questions. One is, I know we had a brief mention of it last committee work session on reasonable time for maintenance. I just wanted to know, make sure that was that's included in the bill or could be handled during the regulatory process. Just wanted to make sure we confirm that.
As you may have seen, the AOBA, the Apartment and Office Building Association of Metropolitan Washington sent an email to the committee this morning suggesting language to address that very issue. So, I think if you want to be explicit that there's a maintenance period, that language is probably unobjectionable. I don't know if, can I give a copy to, did you, okay.
Please.
DHCA hasn't seen that. So,
I yield to DHCA on that. I think if there's an opportunity during the regulatory process to determine what reasonable time for maintenance is, I'd be comfortable with that. But if we need to have something explicit in the bill, I would just want to have clarity. I don't think anybody is looking to get people here on either side. I think the goal is to get as many people in as comfortable and affordable a situation as possible and finding the right balance.
I think this is something, I'm quickly taking a look at this language. I think this is something which we can address within our regulations.
Okay. Do you agree with that?
I think it would be better to make explicit in the bill that what I would suggest is adopting the language that AOBA suggested, but adding in addition to that DHCA would clarify, well, I would include AOBA's amendment, and then at the end of the subsection 9, which is at line 51 of the bill, of the version 4 of the bill, I would suggest adding the executive must adopt regulations to implement this section, including regulations to define reasonable maintenance and repair. I think that's how we would do it to be the most clear. The DHCA can handle this by regulation.
I'd be comfortable with that, just basically explicitly saying that DHCA will do it through the regulatory process. But could you read, you mentioned the amendment, but could you read it if we're going to adopt that, or specifically what you're proposing?
So the amendment at line 44, immediately before where it says supply and maintain air conditioning, it would say except when required for reasonable maintenance and repair, comma, and then it would continue as it's currently drafted. And then at the end of that provision on line 51, after the last sentence is where I would add the executive must adopt or method 2 regulations to implement this section, including regulations to implement this paragraph, including regulations to define define reasonable maintenance and repair.
I would agree with that and propose that we do that. It leaves flexibility to DHCA to determine what that is. I don't think we should be figuring that out through the legislative process, but I do think it just makes explicit that that's an expectation that we would have moving forward, that, you know, we want you to fix your air conditioning if it's broken, and we don't want to penalize you for the time it would take to do it. What's reasonable, you know, should be DHCA's determination, in my view.
That is correct, but then also, DSCA would also ask the owner to give us the alternative plan while the AC is getting fixed, how they're taking care of their tenant.
With fans or some
Correct.
other mechanism.
Yeah.
That seems reasonable. Well, you could do that during the regulatory process to determine, have the alternative plan be part of that. I don't think we have to legislate that aspect of it.
Yeah, correct.
I'll leave that floating for my
That's
colleagues.
fine, that sounds fine. Any objection?
I haven't seen said amendment. I guess you're reading from something that I don't have, but as I think I understand it, you're saying add, thank you. That's all right. Add in paragraph 9 here, supply and maintain except when required for reasonable maintenance and repair. And it sounds like DHCA is okay with that.
And then she's
And then
suggesting
add in
and saying and must adopt
what a
through
reasonable
through
standard
regulation
is.
What reasonable DHCA would be
Right.
making that determination. We would be legislating.
You're fine with that?
Yeah. And as long as we have this authority via regulation, and as I mentioned, in case there is no AC, we'll ask the owner to provide the alternative plan, how they're taking care of their tenant.
It was sent this morning.
Yeah.
Okay.
This email came in an hour ago.
Yeah, I mean, I had assumed you were going to have the ability to regulate on the whole thing. I think a reasonable interpretation of the law as it's currently written would allow you to give that leeway to landlords, but I'm fine if you want to put it in.
Belts and suspenders,
Yeah, I'm fine if you want to put it in.
DHCA would
Yeah,
have.
I mean, it's in Chapter 26 now.
Say it again.
In Chapter 26 now, we have the ability to work with people during.
You already have the leeway.
But this here just clears it up even further, and
Sure.
it gives us an actual regulation to be able to go back with also.
Sure, I'm fine with it. I do have one.
It's fine. Again, I think you already have and conduct your authority in that manner already. But sure, well, we can add some reasonable language. Go ahead.
Yeah. Just had one other point of clarification. On a fire safety issue, I know we addressed this in the last work session, but where there's a potential conflict between a window unit and fire safety, is the result of that requiring central air to be retrofitted through the building? Is there any leeway that DHCA would have? That's the one thing that I don't know that we got resolution on. Am I making sense of what I'm asking?
Sorry, can you say it again?
Okay, so there are times, DHCA or DP, I can't remember who, but there was a recommendation to include language to say, except when it conflicts, with fire, basically that fire safety takes priority. My question would be, there are older units that are in certain rooms, particularly based on some of the decisions that have been made here, that might only have one egress. They might only have one window in a room. Well, if you have one window in a room and you put a window unit in that one window, you've now violated fire safety. So my question is, would there be is there a waiver to not do it because of fire safety? Is there now a requirement, instead of doing a window unit, that you'd have to?
You're not allowed to do it it's just not a waiver, it's prohibition, right?
Yeah, you
Well,
can waive a life safety violation.
No, I'm not saying you would have the waiver wouldn't be for fire safety. The waiver would be for air conditioning. The question is, I'm asking in the practical reality that happens, and there will be certainly circumstances where that exists, as was discussed in the last work session. What is the practical next step? Is the requirement now to do central air a much more costly endeavor for all parties, including the renter? Or is there potential for a waiver because it's a fire safety issue? I'm not offering an opinion here, I'm just asking a question of what, as we have drafted the
What happens
legislation,
when a room cannot
what happens when
be
there's a
cooled?
conflict? What's the requirement, and what's the penalty, and what's the result?
Well, I think last time we talked about where, if this was an issue with one of the rooms, that we would require them to possibly increase the BTUs in one of the acceptable window air conditioner units to be able to cover the entire complex, the entire unit. By doing that, you can probably get air into other rooms that may not be able to have one directly in that room.
So you think you sufficiently have flexibility here to ensure that fire safety is followed, and somebody could be in compliance with the legislation without having to do a total central air retrofit to a building, which could be cost prohibitive to everybody? It could take affordable housing off the market for a total renovation.
I think there are avenues that can work either way. If the owners choose to put in central air, great. If they don't, then if a larger window air conditioner with higher BTUs, keeping the doors open, there could be some things like that we could work out on site to a specific case by case basis.
Okay, well, if the department thinks that they have sufficient flexibility, that is fine by me. I just wanted to raise the issue because that was the one area that I didn't know that we had resolved. So thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a note on the single-family home issue. That was one of the challenging issues. And one of my concerns has just been that when a house can't be cooled entirely, like if you can't put in, you can't cool the dining room, you can't cool the living room, maybe you can put a window unit in the living room, but maybe you can't in the dining room. There's a lot of complexities there that might cause the house to essentially be required to have a central air. And I think that becomes really, really expensive, and I don't think that achieves what we're trying to go for here. So that was one of the reasons why I felt like not including single family was reasonable. But was a difficult topic. Will.
Thank you. That was actually the issue I was going to bring up, because we kind of breezed through that, no pun intended, last time. And just to note, we're doing two things here that no one else who has these requirements does. And I think we're leaving out single-family homes, which is a vast, large number of people who rent. And we are saying in those homes and in those units that there is no AC requirement. And we're also allowing people to, quote-unquote, opt out. So I think both these things will be revisited in full council, and I think that I wasn't necessarily happy with the decision in these instances, but I think we need to look back at them, and I just wanted to get on record before we closed out the committee process to say that.
Yeah, and I had talked with the bill sponsor, and he was supportive of the single-family exemption at the time. So it's a challenging issue. All right, good.
Councilmember Reamer, sorry, but going back to the opt-out, you had raised the point of what happens about leases that are already in progress.
All right, can they switch mid-year or something like that?
Right. So, I mean, we suggested this would be an addendum to the lease, but I'm wondering if we should add an uncodified section 3 that says that, I don't know exactly how to word it, but basically that this bill does not affect current leases, so that it would be, that a lease that's currently in effect, so that it would be, this opt-out would be available once the lease expires and it's at a renewal point. Of course, then you presumably wouldn't want the AC requirement to kick in that meantime for those opt-out situations. So I don't know. I'm sorry for thinking out loud, but
So you're saying there's a lot of leases that are currently in effect, and
Right.
When this bill becomes law, it basically overrides
I mean, I guess they would just have to
leases.
amend the current leases.
It wouldn't be retroactive. It would be when you sign a new lease, I would assume.
Is that well, is that right, though?
I would think that's what you'd have to interpret.
I think that's what Christine is saying, is that we could add language that says,
Should we make that explicit in an uncodified section?
I think we could.
I mean, I do agree, like Councilmember Joando is right, the default rule is bills apply prospectively. I just am not sure how exactly the current lease that is not expired yet, how we would treat that. I mean, I guess, yeah, it wouldn't be.
At the renewal point. Hopefully we can change it. It won't last, so it won't get to full council. Maybe we'll have to deal with it.
But in tandem with the opt-out provision.
Can we do it, can we do it at, because there are a lot of lease renewals that might not necessarily be a new lease, which would be an appropriate time. I mean, a lease is a contract. I mean, we have,
Right.
like, I am a little hesitant to retroactively do something in the midst, to change an existing contract. I mean, it's obviously a complicated issue, but a lot of these contracts are perpetually renewed, right? And so, a renewal is an appropriate time when both parties should be able to negotiate on their own behalf. So, I mean, if we were going to do something, I would say at a renewal would be a natural and legitimate place to do it. I'd be uncomfortable in the middle of a lease because that could introduce uncertainty that one party could raise the cost, and I think we could get a blowback here for what that would mean. I don't think both parties are entering into an agreement in a fair and reasonable point in time. So I think if we did anything, I would say at a new lease or a renewal. I don't know if that's possible.
isn't that what you were just
So, right, so can I add an uncodified section?
Yeah, sure.
Making that clear. I can run the language by you, I guess, after the committee, because I don't have language right now.
If we don't do that, then essentially everyone has to renegotiate or they have to update their leases.
I think it just creates ambiguity. I think that people will be uncertain about what they have to do.
So let's do that.
Also could be regulation as well. But happy to do that.
Oh, well, that's true. It could be regulated.
Yeah, it could be via regulation, or if both the tenant and the landlord, work together and the landlords are there in the middle of the lease and the landlord wants to provide AC, so instead of waiting the entire year and having the tenant go miserable during that, hard period, they can provide, the landlord can provide AC.
We could do that. I mean, at any point. Well, whatever.
All right. Okay, so uncodified, you probably would have done that through the regulation anyway, is what I'm guessing, but just in case there's any ambiguity.
Another belt and suspender.
All right, so we will take this up at full council and continue the discussion there. Oh, we need a committee vote on the whole bill as amended. So without objection, there are, differences along the way. But good, thank you. All right, that concludes our meeting.